event. Quick housekeeping rules, please keep your phones on silent. I know you're all very busy and people are trying to get through to you, but if it's on silent, they'll still get through to you. You can get back to them after we've done what is going to be a very stimulating conversation. Our theme is, by the way, this is the third edition. Our theme is post-pandemic recovery, socioeconomic prospects amidst the chaos. And we have lined up a really distinguished panel to do justice to the theme. At this point, I'd like to bring on, for the welcome address, the president of the U.S. Ghana Alumni Association. Let's welcome, with a nice warm round of applause, Dr. Hilda Manteglia-Boyd.
Thank you very much, Kafui. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this edition of the U.S. Ghana Alumni Association Stakeholder Dialogue under the theme Post-Pandemic Recovery, Socio-Economic Prospects Amidst the Chaos. The U.S. Ghana Alumni Association is made up of alumni of various U.S. government-sponsored exchange programs. The members of USGA desire to consolidate the gains realized from and for all the U.S. State Department exchange programs for the development of Ghana, and also to build a community of active change agents. Just as we have here today, we have a lot of people who promote excellence among themselves within Ghana and the world. Over the past year, USGA has been engaged in various activities and projects in different parts of the country. We initiated the Leadership and Literacy Program, which we have named the LIT Program, the USGA Medical Outreach Program, which we named UMO, the Leadership Training Program for teachers, head teachers, the USGA Mentorship Program, the Virtual Trade Show, Women Empowerment Programs, amongst others. We also have the webinar series under which today's event falls. The U.S. Ghana Alumni Association is grateful to the U.S. State Department for their partnership, which makes these projects possible. Together with many alumni across the country, we have put smiles on the faces of both the young and old and inspired hope. As we are all aware, these are difficult times for many people and their families. The effects of the pandemic and in recent times, the Russia-Ukraine war have been very devastating, and we can all testify to this. Thankfully today, we have put together a panel that has been drawn from across relevant sectors of the economy to discuss the socio-economic prospects amidst this chaos. I want to welcome you all once again to this dialogue, and we hope that we'll be able to discuss all the relevant issues to help as we go through the recovery process. It also provides us as USGA an avenue to stimulate discussion and share creative solutions to drive socio-economic growth. I hope that through these discussions, you will learn a thing or two that will cause your business to thrive. I acknowledge and commend the work of the planning team that has put this together. Thank you all very much for joining us, and I look forward to having a great interactive session with you all. Thank you, and you are welcome.
Thank you, Hilda, for welcoming us to this event. I was wondering how to pronounce USGHAA, and then you said USGA. I said, well, thank you very much. So it's USGA. We're live on the USGA official YouTube channel, so go there, tell a friend that this is what is happening. If you can't be at home, at least you're watching us live on that platform. At this point, we'd like to take a partner message from the U.S. Embassy in Ghana, and we have with us the Council for Public Affairs at the U.S. Embassy. Let's welcome Virginia Elliott.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you. So for those of you I don't know, and there might still be a few and those online, I'm Virginia Elliott, or Ginny, and I'm the Public Affairs Counselor at the U.S. Embassy. On behalf of the Embassy, I want to start by thanking Dr. Hilda, of course, and the U.S. Ghana Alumni Association leadership for inviting us here today for what promises to be an interesting discussion. While the Public Affairs section at the Embassy manages turn you, our esteemed professionals, into representing many different sectors, into U.S. government alumni, the fact is that you are all valued interlocutors and partners of my colleagues across the embassy. Today's discussion focuses on economic issues, which intersect with the work of our U.S. Commerce Department, represented by the Foreign Commercial Service here in Ghana, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, represented by the Foreign Agriculture Service, the U.S. Trade and Development Agency, the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the U.S. Agency for International Development, and the Department of State, which is represented by my colleague here today, Stephanie Hutchinson, on the panel. What you'll hear today is the breadth of work across the U.S. government that supports inclusive economic growth, trade, and development to advance our mutual economic prosperity. Much like the USGA membership represents the breadth of industries, fields, and sectors, all pulling the same direction to strengthen Ghana's development and democracy. We're proud to work together to advance these shared values and mutually beneficial interests. And I look forward to hearing the insights from our distinguished panel and speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Virginia, for your remarks and your capacity as a partner for this particular dialogue and to the association as well. And so now we go into, I take off my MC hat and I'll put on my moderator hat. So we're going to have a conversation on the theme, which is post-pandemic recovery, socioeconomic prospects amidst the chaos. And I'm going to start by having my panelists introduce themselves briefly, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, yes. What their names are, what they do, and then we'll get things started. I'll start from the extreme left. If you watch the flyer, I'm going by the faces of the people on the flyer. From where they are in Ghana, you always start greeting people from the right towards the left. So as you see the screen, I'm going to start with the lady at the very end in the blue. Just tell us a little bit about herself in 2 minutes.
Hello? Okay. Thank you, Kathy. So my name is Regina Honu. I'm the CEO of Shonko Academy, a coding and human-centered design academy, and I'm a software developer by training, a tech and gender advocate.
Hello, good morning. My name is Bridget Jobenuku. I do different things. I am the managing director of Big Flavor Industries, a palm oil production, branding, and marketing company. I also have a non-profit, run a non-profit called Mentoring Women in Ghana. So I am also interested in gender, mentoring young ladies into leadership. And I'm also a politician, so occasionally you see me on a political platform campaigning for the Progressive People's Party as a flag bearer.
Thank you, Gabby. My name is Chonam Apollo. I'm Chief Executive for Siku Technologies. Siku Technologies is a software development and managing consulting firm. We operate from here in Accra, from deploy clients in 6 countries. When I'm not doing Siku Technologies, I'm probably working for AGI, Association of Ghana Industries, as chairman for the Greater Accra region. But also very importantly, I chair the ICT sector for the Ghana Chamber of Commerce as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Hutchinson. I'm the economic counselor at the U.S. Embassy here in Accra. I arrived here in August and previously served in similar capacities in Portugal, Tanzania, Morocco, and Trinidad and Tobago. So really pleased to join this esteemed panel today.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go straight into business, and I'm going to start with just like a broad question on the Ghanaian economy. I'm going to start with the gentleman who also works sometimes with the AGI. Chuna, briefly, how has the economy changed since the onset of the pandemic in 2020, let's say March? What's going to be the broad changes that you've experienced? We'll go around the panel.
Well, thank you for the question. Yes, there have been significant changes, both good and bad. Probably I'll start from the bad. So we all wake up one morning and there was a lockdown and we have nothing. So naturally, once you're not producing, making money. Once you're not making money, you are unable to pay your workers. So you either have the option of reducing salaries or laying off people. The cycle effect is that as you lay off people, then they don't have jobs, then their families struggle. And so yes, we've had that downtime. There has been a lot of mismatch in terms of the sectors that are affected. I mean, as it happened, even when the hospitality sector were most hit because the hotels were closed down and so on and so forth. Some sectors benefited. The sectors like the pharmaceuticals, technology, which I operate. But overall, it was a massive hit on the industry to the extent that the importers of raw material, because we import most of our raw materials, were unable to get the raw material because it was a global pandemic and everywhere in the world was affected. Actually, when we were even about to get raw materials in, the fleet cost has risen to the extent that it was becoming unsustainable to want to bring in raw materials. So it really distracted the entire supply chain of how industry operates. The positive, however, is that as local industry, we were forced to domesticate, as it were. We were forced to begin to produce locally because we normally import most of the things. But within a month, my folks from the pharmaceutical sector could quickly put together industry to manufacture, let's say, hand sanitizers. It never happened. They're able to do things like folks in the fashion sector were doing the face masks and all of them. So all this while we've been asking for industrialization and localization, at least the COVID allowed us to push that agenda a little bit more forward and make sure that we're able to produce some of these things locally. We wish that we could sustain that drive. Because mind you, because the COVID hit everywhere in the world, nowhere is safe. So that even if you're expecting to import, it's still expensive to import and so on. So really we were happy that at least it allows us to improve our capacity to produce locally and actually even to export some of the things we're producing. The distraction caused so many effects, but I'm sure during the course of the conversation
Sure.
we'll get to them.
All right, Chuna, thank you very much for giving us that broad overview and looking at not just the negative, but the positive, but also the negative impacts of the pandemic. I think I'll go to Brigitte. I want to know from a personal point of view, from the point of view of Vape Flavors, you promote and you produce palm oil. Did COVID affect you in any way, shape or form?
Not really. I think that for anybody who produces locally and is dependent or uses the local industry, COVID did not quite affect us in a negative way, or didn't have much impact. Yes, there was fear that our farmers would be affected and all that, but we found that the local industry, particularly in the area of food and agric, actually probably grew because suddenly there was a lot more dependence on the local industry. I'd like to say that the local industry, we are very much dependent, or our economy tends to look a lot at the macroeconomics and the numbers and the figures. But during COVID, the micro became a lot more important. People, the average Ghanaian is not, or does not see the benefits of the oil market or the gold or the cocoa. Yes, there are people in that industry who benefit greatly from it and directly from it, but on the average and on the whole in Ghana, it is the micro, it is the local industry. And every district has its own domestic economy. And therefore, I think what COVID did was make us go back and pay attention to each domestic economy in every district. And this is where the politician in me comes out, where there used to be a politician, may he so rest in peace, who used to talk all the time about domestication. And he had a point there, because when this came to the crunch, where imports were beginning to suffer and there was a lockdown and there was no manufacturing, it came down to the primary products. And the primary products came from agriculture, which we already have. So there was then the demand for us to now pay attention and probably invest. I don't know that we have invested in it, but invest in those. Another thing is women-led and run businesses thrived during COVID, or we became more aware of women-run and women-led businesses. Because indeed, 2/3 of our agric sector is run by women. Apart from that, products, palm oil, for example, it's women who produce the palm oil for me and in many areas of Ghana. So women-led businesses were impacted by COVID, but thankfully, probably not negatively, because as I said, COVID led us into paying attention to these areas and depending on the domestication. Right. And I think that we should carry on from that. So when we come to talking about post-COVID, I will mention some of these things.
Thank you. Thank you for your opening remarks. What I get from you is that the micro became more important, microeconomy, and the impact or contribution of women was brought more to the fore with the pandemic. I'll come to you shortly, Stephanie, but I want to go to Regina. Software, how did, Chonam said, well, his business wasn't really affected, the software side of things, but was that the same story for you as well?
Yeah, so we consider ourselves, those in technology, as being on the opportunity side of the pandemic, because there was a rise in the need of digital, to bridge or augment the fact that people had to stay at home. So everything went e. There was e-learning, e-health, e-delivery, everything. Everybody was trying to go e. So from that perspective, we were, and also there was a mindset change, right? So prior to the pandemic, each time we would push or advocate for more people learning how to create technology, it was like, oh, do we really need it, but then after, there was like, okay, if this is to happen again, which now you don't know if it will, you needed to have some technology acumen. And for people that had businesses and had to work from home, there was then the realization that they didn't even know how to use all these tools. On the other side, for the group that we work with, the big conversation was access to device and cost of data, which is a privilege, especially for the group that we work with, which is women and girls. So not a lot of people were able to benefit, from being able to quickly transition So there were a lot more people that were cut off, that were not connected, a lot more people that were also in an unsafe space. So we saw the rise in teenage pregnancy. We also saw the rise in abuse because now women were in the same spaces with their abusers where there were no outlets. For them to be able to go out and get any sort of help or redress. And then we also saw more rise in domestic care, which obviously caused a conversation of if they should continue to go back to work and all of that. So on my side, there was a lot of positive with tech. And I think the last piece was also exploring remote work. So for us, we saw this as an opportunity to now export our talents, right? So if we're not able to export a lot of raw materials, we can export our talent. So we were exporting a lot of digital talent to the rest of the world. So remote work became a big thing for us. And we were able to sort of push more women to take advantage of being able to earn some money while they were at home.
Thank you very much, Regina. So the rise of the E happened, mindset changes, on the downside, cost of data, and then access were problems. And then we touched on some issues of domestic violence, psychological, mental health issues, and it's just so great that sitting next to me is a medical doctor and a clinical psychologist who will give us a few thoughts right now, Dr. Isaac Newman, after we're looking at the impact of the pandemic. And from where you sit, as somebody who looks into our minds, what was the impact?
Well, we don't look into your minds. So mental health basically is your thinking, feelings, and behavior. So thinking, feelings, and behavior. So all the mental health issues is on these three levels. And so generally when it comes to mental health issues with pandemics, it is largely ignored or neglected for various reasons. One, the general understanding of mental health issues is really not there. People really don't understand what it is. And again, people make mental health issues a personal issue instead of a health issue. Because health is four-dimensional: physical, mental, social, and spiritual. These are the dimensions of health. And so it's neglected also because all attention is usually on physical well-being. So if you look at even this pandemic, every intervention is on the virus, on the vaccines, but the impact, which is on the level of mental health, we really don't look there. We may deal with the virus, but the impact on the level of mental health is going to be there forever. So the general things that came up, or is still present, is stress. Stress with reorganization of your life, stress in changing things, coping with the new norm, and things like that. It was amazing. Trying to keep people in the same environment for a long time. So stress with families, individuals, the community, everything was stressful. Then anxiety, the fear of I'm going to die, I'm not going to die. A relative is going to die, I'm not going to die. Am I going to get the disease or not? And if you look at even the anxiety with all the research, realize that it depends on where you are. If you're a health professional like myself, at the height of the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, I had this client who worked with me, and when she came, she said I was coughing. Hey,
So you were coughing?
no, the client was coughing. And she said, I asked her, have you been in touch with anybody who's traveling? She says, yes. Someone just came from the US or something. Hey. At the beginning, we all afraid, we didn't understand what the whole thing is. So they come to me in the consulting room. They said I shouldn't see any patient. I've come into contact with suspected case. Come in the consulting room up to 12 p.m. after night duty. Put me in a certain isolation unit. It wasn't easy at all. And we didn't understand what the virus was, what it was doing and all that. So even health professionals, it was a big thing for health professionals. Then also if you had a chronic illness, the disease was affecting more people with chronic illness and the elderly. That anxiety around them was also very, very, very great. So fear related, most of our decisions was based on fear, and not based on the actual, now that we understand the virus, things are being eased a bit because we know what to do. So anxiety was up, and those who were not able to cope with the anxieties and the stresses went into depression. So depression, rates went up. Then also isolation, social isolation, and the boredom and anger. We were angry, especially if someone was not following the protocols, and the person gives it to you. There was a lot of anger in the system, government interventions. It was a whole lot. Then also PTSD, people who had also witnessed certain, we watch TV and see people dying, you are admitted for COVID, you see all the gadgets on patients coming back. So those who even had admission and came back, we're having these flashbacks, nightmares, and all kinds of
post-traumatic stress.
Yes, it was also going up. Then I think she mentioned abuse went up. In some countries even more than 2-3 times, because now people usually use social moving out of the house to escape from abusive relationship. Now we have to live with abuser for a longer period of time, and the stresses of the season also worsened or increased triggers for abuse. So that also went up. Suicide rates also went up because of all those problems there. So government interventions for mental health has not been as it was supposed to. I remember in Ghana, there was all kinds of discussions with Ghana Psychological Association and Council to put psychologists at various centers to help. So something was done. But if you look at the investment in mental health, regarding this season, it wasn't what it was supposed to be. But think about people who are not following all the things they were supposed to follow. It's mental health. Why are people doing the things they are supposed to do that they are not supposed to do? Why are people taking certain decisions? It's a function of their mental well-being. So the season is rough actually for people.
Were there any bright spots?
Well, every crisis has its own positives and negatives. So those who were focusing more on the positives about the season, they actually did well. People became richer. People developed new strategies of doing businesses. People found new ways. Some families were even coming closer because now the husband or the wife doesn't have an excuse to go out. We're all there. People were doing exercises together. They were doing all kinds of things. So there were actual positive things. So that is the good news about crisis. Every crisis has its own positives and negatives. But usually those who focus more on the positives about crisis, they do well. The crisis actually makes them better. So those were some of the positive things. People's businesses were booming because they were developing new ways of doing things and things like that.
All right. Okay. Isaac, thanks a lot. And those were a couple of introductory remarks. In case you just joined us, it's the Stakeholder Dialogue, the U.S. Ghana Alumni Association doing this. It's the 3rd edition. We're looking at the post-pandemic recovery, socio-economic prospects amidst the chaos. Stephanie has been listening. Feel free to comment on anything you've heard. I saw you making notes. And then we can look at some lessons that we've learned from what's happened before we go into the post-pandemic recovery.
Thank you very much. No, a really interesting discussion. I love a lot of the themes that have been raised, and one I wanted to sort of touch on, a few I wanted to touch on. One is just this idea of connectivity, which is, we were separated at certain times. Maybe we were in the same house with other people, maybe we weren't, but connectivity became so much more important, and I think what's really great is the Alumni Association is really about making connections and continuing connections, and that is a lot about what we do at the embassy, is trying to foster connections. I've made some new ones here today, so that's fantastic, and those connections I think are really important across the board in what we do and in our priorities as the U.S. government in Africa and in Ghana. And the Secretary of State took his first trip in late 2021 when conditions permitted to the continent, and he talked about 5 areas of interest, common interest between African nations and the United States, specifically global health, the climate crisis, inclusive economic growth, democracy, peace, and security. And so I think the elements of the global health as well as inclusive economic growth are really key to this discussion today. And I just wanted to mention a few things that we have done here in Ghana to support both the COVID response effort, but also in terms of promoting inclusive economic growth. First of all, during the pandemic, we provided financial support to assist with personal protective equipment, medical supplies, technical training, ventilators, and the like, for directly impacting the COVID response. It's already been mentioned that there were a number of businesses who were very entrepreneurial and creative and were able to pivot during the pandemic. I think that's another very positive upside of of the pandemic is how businesses really seized the opportunity and either pivoted their production lines or identified new opportunities to take advantage of the situation. And I love the idea of exporting our talent. I think that's a really nice concept, a nice way to frame it. And I think people were able to export their talent and also share that through their businesses and their business models with others. The American companies who are part of the community here also stepped up to assist and to show the importance of Ghana to their business lines, but also to the community as well. And then, of course, donations of vaccines, 9.6 million doses of COVID vaccines to end of March 25th. And now we're looking to support also Ghana's efforts to get more shots in arms through capacity building. So I think all of this is to say that these efforts not only are COVID response, but also building capacity in the health system. And as I think, as you pointed out, good health is vital to economic growth. So I think as from a systems standpoint, I think that's quite important. And then just to add, we're also working in the area of energy to improve energy connections through the Millennium Challenge Corporation and Power Africa. And then focused on two-way trade. It's very focused on promoting two-way trade, and I would just say that it grew 50% between 2018 and 2021, and heavily favors Ghana. So through efforts like Prosper Africa that really try to assist Ghanaian businesses in terms of either finding financing opportunities or market insights, or through AGOA that offers trade preferences, or through the West Africa Trade and Investment Hub, which can help businesses navigate AGOA. These are efforts that we're working on to try to assist and deepen the connections between U.S. and Ghanaian businesses. And then finally, just to add, because I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, because a lot of the people in this room that are watching online have participated in embassy programs. So we have a women entrepreneurship programs, we have the Washington Mandela Fellowship Program, and those really, again, like I said, are designed to foster connections and community and help with inclusive economic growth. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those insights and the facts and the things that the U.S. government has been doing to assist overall, and especially with Ghana and Africa. And so we're thinking, okay, 2022, COVID, okay, we've gone through maybe 2, 3, 4 waves, and then boom, Russia, Ukraine, war. I'll start off with you, Stephanie. What do you think the impact is going to be on economic prospects in Ghana? Maybe, yeah.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, I would just say that we have seen some impact on prices and supply chains, and the U.S. government is certainly looking at ways to assist in mitigating these efforts, particularly in the area of fertilizers. I think that's one place that we've seen prices increase. With our Department of Agriculture looking how to boost our own domestic production, as well as working with partners and allies in how we can also assist them in boosting production and ensuring, shoring up food security.
Awesome, thank you for that. I'm going to ask all of you the same question. I mean, how do you think this Russia-Ukraine conflict is going to affect what you're doing? But before that, one big lesson that you learned from when the pandemic came through to now, I mean, just from what you've shared with all of us, the biggest thing you've learned. I'll start with Brigitte, who's looking at me. I want you to speak. Big lesson, and then we'll talk about Russia.
I wasn't expecting that. I was just looking at you and listening, but I'll try and talk about it. I think that it was mentioned earlier that one thing that the pandemic taught us was the fact that our connections are important. We need that personal connection between all of us, whether it's countries, whether it's families, whether it's people. we cannot take away the personal from the businesses we run or the work that we do. And therefore, the human touch, which was on many fronts, became a lot more important to us. And I think that post the pandemic, I walked in here this morning and I hesitated to shake hands, but it was a very welcome gesture to be able to do. And whilst it sounds simplified in this manner, what the pandemic did was teach us to trust, which is another element that's very important, even in business. To trust instinctively without a connection. When you break it down to business terms, e-business, for example, we were suddenly willing to put our products on a motor rider's back and have him go and deliver and actually believe that we will be paid, and we were paid. So there are certain intangible things that we did not think about, but we learned to do thanks to the pandemic.
Trust.
Yes.
Trust and connection. Jonah, biggest lesson for you. Then I'll go to Regina.
Well, when necessity necessitates, impossibility becomes possible.
All right.
So I have a client. Part of my business is to build technology for schools. So these clients do not allow us to integrate technology into schools and allow parents to use simply on religious ground, because he's a pastor and he thinks that technology was an evil mechanism by Satan to dupe and to get them close to Satan. So he wasn't going to allow that. Fast forward, when the pandemic came, this guy called me. He said that he has no option than to now use technology.
Where did Satan go? He's still around?
So I know that, wow. So really the pandemic actually made a lot of impossibility become possible.
Okay.
But the biggest lesson is that those who prepared benefited more. So a lot of the businesses would not save for long term. They live from hand to mouth. They don't have long-term strategy, long-term plans, and so on. And a lot of companies don't have maybe 2 months' salaries. They have to wait and collect money by the month and pay salaries and so on. So when the pandemic happened, there has to be lockdown. 1 month down the line, the business is shut because they were unable to sustain the business. But those folks who plan for a year and so on, they are able to withstand the pandemic. So what my bigger lesson is that preparation all the time.
Thank you so much. Regina, what was your lesson? Big takeaway.
So my big takeaway was resilience and disruption. Right? For me, resilience in the sense that those who were able to see the positive of the pandemic or able to rise above the stress and anxiety and fear were able to pivot their businesses, their brands, and even just the way they lived to the new normal. And those who were not unable to do that really struggled. Disruption in the sense that it gave me a new perspective on how you can become comfortable in business, right? And I think the pandemic even gave me new insights that we hadn't explored so many areas. And we had stayed in our sweet spot and we were operating in that area. But the pandemic made us realize that, look, we have to be disruptive more.
How were you disruptive at your end?
So at my side, I remember there was always a big conversation about like online learning and all of that. And we were like, oh, is the market ready? Because we work a lot with women and girls. So we looked at device access and all of that. So we took our program online and we looked at the challenge of misinformation. Because a lot of the women were also in our WhatsApp group spreading a lot of misinformation about the virus because they were not informed. So we decided to create this portal to address misinformation. We took our programs online, got a whole new clientele, and we sort of automated a little bit more of our services. So I asked myself, why didn't I do this sooner, right? And I think it was because I've become so comfortable in what I was doing that I had forgotten that one of the things I'm supposed to be is disruptive. So I was just kind of staying in my sweet spot. So for me, it was resilience, and you always have to be disruptive in whatever industry you are if you're in business.
So R&D,
Yes.
resilience and disruption. Isaac, big lesson for you.
I think that something about fear left. Because now people are no more afraid of things. We're all scared. We've gone through. We are alive. We're doing well. So whatever comes next, what bigger thing can come? So people have this. They've learned how to deal with fear. People are more confident now. They are no longer afraid of things. And so I think that regardless of what happens with Russia and Ukraine, people, if it was something new, people would have been more afraid. But now, because of the pandemic, people have developed some resilience, some faith, some capacity to endure. So bigger things now are no longer bigger things because we've gone through worse things. And I think that is one of the benefits of the pandemic.
All right. Our hashtags, and we have many of them. USGHAA is one of them. Hashtag socioeconomic growth. Hashtag thrive. Hashtag recovery. And we are live on YouTube, so you can put your comments in the live chat there. And on Facebook, it's the US Ghana Alumni Association. We want to interact with you, so send in your comments and your questions. We'll be happy to hear from you. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the US-Ukraine thing, Ukraine-Russia, because it's part of the post-pandemic recovery. We're recovering from the pandemic, and then this happens. How has it affected you or the work that you do? You have people coming in and saying that this, I'm more worried now because the Ukrainians and the Russians can't see eye to eye, and then we just go around. How has it affected?
No, I think that stretching from the earlier point, we are not really having.
They're not scared again.
No, if you look at discussions on TV, radio, it's really not been a panic kind of discussions. People are wanting to find reasons when it's going to end and all that. But if it wasn't for the pandemic, I'm sure a lot of people would have been afraid as to what was going to happen. But now we don't get that. The sense of panic and fear is gone because people are going through worse things. So it's giving them a certain capacity to face their fears and to be head on. So I haven't seen that. I haven't.
The business community, Jonah, Brigitte, Ukraine, Russia, any effects on you?
Of course, naturally, yes. I mean, I would like to begin by saying that war should never be encouraged under those circumstances. And that as human societies, it's important that no matter how difficult the situation is, we find ways of dialoguing than to go to war. That notwithstanding, the US-Ukraine war would naturally have effects.
Russia.
Sorry. The Russian-Ukraine war would naturally have effects on us, especially in Africa. Mind you, Russia is one of the biggest producers of oil among other products. And Ukraine produce major things like wheat and so on. And in a war situation, they don't care any longer about economics. It's about life.
But are we getting wheat from Ukraine? In Ghana?
No, it's a global supply chain. Once it is distracted, you will have effect. And of course, some of the wheat we import come from Ukraine, from our AGI records. And I'm saying that the way the global oil cartel works, when there's distraction from Russia, it would affect every oil consumer in the world. And you and I are oil consumers. And that there's a direct relation between the recent increase in the price of crude, fuel we buy at home and the war. You can't take that out. Of course, that's not the only reason, but there are many other reasons. But that's also a point. So what I'm saying is that it appears that this is early days yet, because by the time the supply chain properly distracted, the effect may be more apparent than we're
say now.
So we should brace ourselves for bigger shocks.
For more.
Mm.
The only good thing that may happen is, if you see how the economic cycle works, I think that for oil we're peaking, and that rate it can only come down. So we're hoping that the prices will fall, which are natural occurrences that happen in the market. So we have to pray for some of these market activities to occur. Otherwise, the way things are going is not looking good for anybody. And we pray that they end the war very quickly. I'm sure they should be tired themselves by now. And they may want peace themselves.
All right. Brigitte, the producers and promoters of palm oil,
Yes.
do they care about Ukraine and Russia?
They don't. As my, well, from where I come, the cost of my palm oil production, processing and production in the Volta region has not changed. It's dependent on the season, and the season for palm is around now until the end of May into June. Then the cost of the product starts to rise based on the season, the season of the palm. What, however, has affected my price is transport.
Yeah.
It's packaging, plastic, which is produced here, but I believe that the raw material for the production is imported. And of course, they probably use fuel to run their machinery. So that affects my cost directly. But
How have you responded?
unfortunately,
Okay, sorry.
well, I have to change my prices. And I was saying that I heard on the City FM this morning the price of palm oil in the markets, and I realized I was underpricing myself. So hello, my friends. But yes, the price of the raw material has not changed, but the packaging and transport will have to change.
And in terms of percentage, what is that? I mean, on your build up, what is the contribution of packaging and transport?
You see, the thing about the first consumer goods markets is that your margins are really very small. So if I don't increase my price, then my margin is eaten up completely.
Gotcha.
So sometimes I might have to increase my price by, I can't off the top of my head say it now, but it's gone up significantly. Now, I am in competition with people who are producing in the eastern region closer to Accra, who process their palm oil differently. So my price is a bit premium. And then now that we all have to go and buy packaging at a higher price, my product suffers. But I'll say this is an opportunity to promote my products. My product is premium. It's a very good product.
Mm-hmm.
It's different. It's very flavorful. So you will pay the price for it rather than go for Sudan dyed products in the market.
Which you don't want. Thank you very much, Brigitte, for the plug. And I'll go and taste it and come back and report to you. Once briefly before I bring in Regina.
Yes.
Yes.
So about the plastic, the cost of increasing plastic, there's something happening. Government has introduced an environmental tax, 10% on importation of plastic products. But most of our producers import these plastic in order to create the packaging and so on.
Mm-hmm.
That 10% tax is affecting our people tremendously.
Big time.
In the same vein, if you're importing finished product of plastic-made product, finished product, you're not paying any tax. So you're incentivizing importation of finished products supposed to allow people to produce locally.
What would you counsel government to do?
They should scrap of that tax. It's not friendly at all.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, just take it off.
All right.
Allow importers of raw materials to produce and industrialize.
Awesome. Great stuff. Regina. Yes.
So,
Let's flip it up.
yeah. So in my space, fuel going up affects so many different things because now there's the domino effect on the cost of prices across board, which I'm sure everybody's experiencing. Today on City, they were talking about bread. Each day you go to the shop, something has increased. The other thing for me also is devices, cost of devices brings about the conversation about when do we start locally manufacturing our own types of devices here.
Like we did with masks and things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we have all come to understand digital is here to stay. And then the last piece also, which is like another key piece is like the cause and effect. So we have, fuel, we have the devices. That was the last piece, I just lost my train of thought, which is affecting us. Okay, I forgot what I was going to say.
No, you come back. We have time.
Yeah, so I guess when we come back, oh yes, underemployment.
Yes, you came back, you see.
Underemployment, yes. So we talk a lot about unemployment, but I feel also now the big conversation is underemployment, because even for those that are employed and are not being paid well, they cannot afford this high cost of living that we're experiencing now. So we now have to have the conversation about, if cost of living is going to go up, which has happened, are we going to talk about salaries? Are we going to talk about, setting up standard wages? And especially when it comes to my space where you're selling a skill, not a tangible, it affects your pricing. You can't increase if you want to build a website or increase that because it's like, okay, why? Now things are hard, so reduce your prices. But also for people that work in service space, a lot of young people who are not paid well, they are not able to make ends meet.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come to Stephanie now. We're going to be talking for a little bit about strategies to thrive. That's one of our hashtags. And we'll start from the macro and then come down to the micro. So from what you say, Stephanie, what are the interventions that are required to jumpstart the economy and keep things nice and bubbly in this post-pandemic environment?
Thank you for the question. And maybe if I could just back up one step and just make one remark about the previous conversation. So I wanted to mention, as I said initially, the Secretary had identified, several shared issues between Africa, Ghana, the United States that are important for all of us. And those included democracy, peace, and security. And I think African voices and Ghanaian voices in particular are very important on those issues and in the context of Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And so, those affect all of us. Again, peace, security, democracy, those are the issues that are at the forefront. So those are important across the board.
Indeed.
So back to your follow-up question.
Yes. Well, this was useful because thank you to the environment. And then we can go look at strategies. Yeah.
Yes, so I think in terms of strategies, I mentioned that USAID and other partners across the U.S. government are working at system strengthening. So system strengthening, whether it's the health sector, energy sector to increase connections, or within the business sector to either connect U.S. and Ghanaian firms or provide financial support through our Development Finance Corporation, support feasibility studies for businesses through U.S. Trade and Development Agency, support exports into Ghana to facilitate business through our export-import bank, or through USAID helping to capitalize firms so they can get to that next level. Because oftentimes we do great ideas and sometimes there's a gap in funding, but some of our tools, Prosper Africa, and others can really help bridge those gaps. So I think that's where we're focused on the systems, but also in the private sector to help mobilize financial resources, including in the agricultural sector.
Thank you very much for that. I'm pleasantly surprised to have that we have a clinical psychologist in a business and economics discussion. I see why you were here, but it's a pleasant surprise because it's never happened before. And so, as part of the interventions, I want to start with the whole think, feel, and do that's your field. What do you want to see happen to make this recovery real and sustainable?
Generally, in mental health, there's a principle that we use to help people when it comes to crisis, right? And that principle says that events do not automatically determine people's outcome, but it is how people process the event,
The response.
how they evaluate the event. So, for example, two people will fail an exam. One person will say, okay, people fail, I'll write again, I'll move on. Another person too would be very sad about it, blame everybody else, and the person won't do well. So it may not be the failure of the exam itself, but it is how they process that event. So one of the things about dealing with crisis has to do with having a positive appraisal of the events that happens all the time. So in this season, those who were appraising it positive, okay, pandemic has happened, what are the opportunities, what can I do? They are the ones who are likely to move on. Those who are very negative about the season, they are likely not to do well. So positive appraisal of events. Another important thing has to do with feeding on positive information. You know, in this time, there are all kinds of, news items, people putting all kinds of things online. And people are reading all kinds of things. And so your thinking is heavily influenced by the information you share. So if at this time we are feeding on the good stuff, the positive stuff, it's likely that you don't have a positive feeling about these things and move on. The next is surround yourself with positive people. So this is the time to network with the right people. People would urge you on, would encourage you, people would push you on. And unfortunately, when people are sad, they surround themselves with people.
Other sad people.
They are likely to...
Misery loves company.
Yeah, when they are sad, instead of listening to music that will lift them up, they are likely to listen to music that will depress them, But the opposite is what will get them out. Then also, when people focus on solutions instead of the problem, they are likely to engage their creative ability to move on. So instead of focusing on, okay, there's a pandemic, you should focus on, okay, what do I do? So instead of focusing on the issue, we focus on how to get out of the issue. It helps. Then maybe finally I'll add that when people lump problems together, they feel overwhelmed. When they separate them, they realize that they can fix it. So you may have marital problems, educational problems, financial problems, work-related stresses. If you decide to put all of them together to think about all of them at the same time, you feel overwhelmed. But if you separate the issue, okay, there's a marital problem, what are the issues, how do I fix it? There's an academic problem, what are the issues, how do I fix it? If you separate them, you won't feel overwhelmed. You realize that, they're sitting individually, it may not be that overwhelming if all of them are put together.
Okay.
So around this time where there are all kinds of issues around, people are thinking about a lot of things, it's better to separate the issues and fix them one by one instead of putting all of them together.
Right.
But we have an unlimited capacity to overcome anything.
Okay.
And that is what I've learned about this system. We have the capacity to deal with anything if we only think about them in a way that will make us progress.
Yes. So separate the issues, more like a salad instead of a soup.
Yes.
You can see the different things. Okay, great stuff. So now, solution oriented, and we're going to riff on this for a while, and I'll start with Chunam. What do you want to see happening as far as government interventions to help you and people like you in your space? And the whole idea is we want to re-strategize and get back to where we were before the pandemic struck. What do you want to see happen?
Okay, thank you. So there have been several, some government interventions in dealing with the COVID. Most of them, I'm sure all of us are familiar with, like the COVID relief fund, where some monies were given to SMEs, supposed to be a form of loan to help them push their business and so on. I've not seen any study done yet to see the effect of that fund. But there are other programs like the Obatampa Care and so on and so forth that were all earmarked to help businesses to restore back. I also like to mention that the policy rates have reduced, on the peak of the COVID, essentially so to promote increase in loanable funds and cheaper funds and so on. But the realities still remain the same. The cost of borrowing is still very high.
Where are we now?
In the African sub-region, we're borrowing on average of 24% per annum. And that's still very high. Given that we've gotten the Continental Free Trade Agreement that is seeking to promote trade between and among African countries, you need to be very competitive with some of these things. 24% is super high. Ethiopia, for example, they borrowed about 12% on the highest per annum. South Africa borrowed around 8%. And we have to be competing with all these people in the same market. We're not competitive. Now, let's even assume that the loan was that competitive. The truth is that accessibility is so difficult.
because the banks we have in Ghana, most of them are commercial in nature. So you've got a goods at the port, they give you money, you clear, kind of pay back and so on. But money to develop industry is almost non-existent. We don't have medium to long-term financing. Well, government has just introduced the development bank. Our prayer is that we are waiting, we can't wait any longer.
Is it working? Is it working?
No, they are setting it up.
So it's not working yet?
So we're giving it time. They are setting it up. But at least there's a law that allows it. They understand they have a board, and so on and so forth. So we're hoping that will come and solve the problem some way. But why don't the commercial banks create, portfolios that allow for medium to long-term financing? Now SMEs can't go to the bank and access money to put into 3 years venture. When you borrow money, the next month they will be at your door. They want you to begin to pay. It's not helpful at all. The other point I like to mention has to do with power and the cost of power.
Electricity, right?
Electricity.
Okay.
It's so expensive. Currently, I think 1 kilowatt per megawatt hour is about 16 cents. So 16 cents is very high. Given that in Ethiopia they buy it at 6 cents. And 30% of the entire production cost is consumed by the cost of power. So if 30% is that high, really you're not competitive.
All right. So you want cheaper power, you want lower
we want
rates.
the cost of power to come down drastically.
Mm-hmm.
We want cheaper money. And we want our people to be able to access the money.
Okay.
Accessibility of the money.
Right.
And I'm saying that the economy is almost harsh for SMEs especially. Look at the laws that are put in place for importation. It's almost more incentivizing to import than to produce locally.
All right. So make it more friendly for people to produce locally.
Yeah.
That's what will be on your wish list.
Exactly.
All right.
You know the benchmark value we talked about, where it is more lucrative to import than to produce. Because there's a government policy that almost take off the taxes they pay at the port so that you can import easily. That's why about 70% of everything used in Ghana are imported.
And that needs to change. And that has to be on the wish list. Okay, thank you so much. Brigitte, feel free to respond to anything or add anything to that. And then also, I want to give you an extra question. What would you advise somebody who's setting up a business to do? We started with advice that person.
Well, it's addressing what I was going to talk about anyway. About 12 years ago, I acquired and read a book written by an American lady, well, she's Canadian actually, called Aviva Wittenberg Cox. Aviva Wittenberg Cox. And the book says, the title of the book is Why Women in Business. And when I think back on what she said in that book, it's almost as if she knew all this was going to happen, because she said the 3 things that was going to drive economic development worldwide was women. She said 3 W's: women, the weather, as in climate, and the World Wide Web, the internet. And that has come to be. So if you are thinking about, say you said someone thinking about setting up a business, please set up a business that involves women, employs women, or has women as clientele. Women are on the rise. Women are a commodity right now. So I'm a gender person, but it is the truth. Do you know, for example, that in a place like Japan, it is the women who decide what cars the family drives? So even automobile industries target the women. So I think that with the pandemic, we noticed what were the businesses that thrived. Personal care, we have lots of women in that industry. Food, agric, it's women. Now when it comes to climate change, we are all talking about climate change now for purposes of food security, first and foremost, and of course, to save our planet. I would say, I heard Chonam talk about the fact that the plastics industry is being taxed so as to put some control on our use of plastics. But maybe we shouldn't be taxing it. Maybe we should be looking at innovative ways of, recycling, reuse, and all that. And perhaps our own sanitation. And when you go into sanitation and sanitation as a commodity or a product, you will find women there too. Now, the World Wide Web, I'm sure Regina and anybody else in that area has taught us. I mean, e-commerce, e-business is the thing now. You want to start a business, think about the innovation of it, where the internet and IT is involved, and of course think about how you can use e-commerce to promote, to sell, to produce. Regina talked about remote work and the fact that we are now able to export human resource whilst working remotely and all that. So these are the areas where the pandemic actually brought to the fore that these thrived and survived the pandemic and will survive Russia, Ukraine, when it come what may. So these are the areas we should be looking at.
Thank you so much. Come to you, Regina, and I'll just twist the question a little bit. You work a lot with young people, and a lot of them are graduating from universities and polytechnics across the country. They want to secure jobs. Some of them want to go abroad. I mean, what are you saying to these people about opportunities that may exist here?
So you have to paint both an aspirational and realistic picture, right? So aspirational in the sense that we live in a society and economy where you can create a market, you can build products, you can sort of use your entrepreneurial ability to develop a new business or idea. Realistic in the sense that, you have to understand also your market, you have to understand the skills that you have, you have to understand, how to stand out, how to be competitive, but also understand, the policies, the rules, the guidelines. So we encourage young people to think outside of the box, not to let their environment, their community define them. Because most people sort of set themselves to where they are, and this is as far as they can go. We encourage them that now learning is a lifelong experience. It doesn't stop. So just because you graduated, what you learned to school is just 10%, And also to focus on the soft skills, which is also the missing components that employers are looking for. Your confidence, and we see that a lot, their inability to express themselves, to carry a conversation, to be bold, and we say to them, what is the worst that can happen? Go out there and be different, because there's also the let's follow what everybody is doing. And on the other side, we also have to encourage, parents who are very uncertain about the prospects for young people in this digital world, which I find, very interesting, because you have one side, parents who don't understand all the opportunities and they want to hold their children back because they are afraid. And you have a lot of young people who want to go out there and explore but are limited, by their parents who are like, okay, don't do this, stay within this comfort area. So we are asking them to explore, to try new things, to fail fast. We teach them failure mentality, which I think is also a missing component. Here, failure is like, okay, failing is how you go and learn. And as a young person who wants to be disruptive, or you want to start a new business, or you want to push yourself out of your comfort zone, failure is part of it, right? And so it's not always roses, it's not always sweet, and that is also the realistic part, not to paint just the one success story, but to let them know that it's a balance, so you push yourself, you fail some, you win some, you keep moving, you keep disrupting, but you always make sure that you're always learning, always upgrading, and then the cherry on the top, improve your digital skills. That's what we always say.
Thank you so much. Great stuff. We'll continue with a couple of messages, a couple of questions around the panel, and then we'll open it up for you to ask questions. This particular dialogue is being part. We have our media partners: GH1 TV, City TV, City FM, Multimedia, the Ghana News Agency. Our hashtags are hashtag recovery, hashtag thrive, hashtag socioeconomic growth, and hashtag USGA, which is USGHAA. And we're live on YouTube. I hope you're putting some contributions in the live chat, as well as on Facebook. It's the US Ghana Alumni Association. Stephanie, you've been listening to all this beautiful conversation going back and forth. I don't know if there's any comments you want to make, but if you don't, or if you do, I'd like to also speak to us about resources that are available from where you sit for people who are into business to help with their post-pandemic recovery.
Absolutely. I do want to just follow on the comment about risk-taking, and I think that's a really important message, and to be willing to put yourself out there and to take a risk. And it's true, we always hear about the success stories, but there are equally number of failures, and I think sort of the success is usually born out of experiences like that. So that's a really positive and wonderful message to reinforce. In terms of resources, we at the U.S. Embassy and I specifically am available to help channel questions and address questions, but there is really a range of agencies here in Accra who are working to support Ghanaian and U.S. businesses. So whether that is the Foreign Commercial Service that works specifically with the U.S. business community, but tries to create partnerships with Ghanaian businesses, whether that's our U.S. Trade and Development Agency, which is focused on supporting economic development in ways that also connects to the U.S. Private sector. Our Prosper Africa team that helps to connect financing, market research, and support the great ideas that are coming out of all these excellent risk takers and entrepreneurs in Ghana, or the Development Finance Corporation, among others. But we're here at the embassy to help you and to connect you with those resources and to try and facilitate the exciting business ventures that people are.
You just find you on the internet, the US Embassy, correct?
Yes, on the U.S. Embassy, on our website, on our webpage, on our Facebook page, and on the website in particular, there is a list of resources there, and then also some email addresses that you can get to us and ask more specific questions.
Okay, just thank you for that. Sean, I'm just wondering, with the AGI, are there any resources that are available to people who are in business and they want some help? Advisory resources, what about information?
Well, there are a couple. Number one, AGI is currently doing something with the MasterCard Foundation and also the Ghana Enterprise Agency, where actually from tomorrow, we're starting to mentor a group of entrepreneurs nationally. So we're selecting business leaders, startups, and so on, especially women, and we're mentoring them. The mentorship includes not only meeting and helping them shape their businesses, but also connecting them to financing options. So we've got partner banks, like Fidelity Bank has a product where if you are a young entrepreneur, especially female, you can access a facility of up to $1 million Ghana cedis with a 10% interest rate, 10%. I mean, if you're interested, I can connect you to them directly. So there's some of these interventions. So what we're doing now is to get our members align them to these interventions. GIZ also has a couple of these interventions. I know of USAID also. So there are several specific interventions.
Great.
But overall, the hassle is getting really real. And as business leaders, we've got no option than to really just put our foot to the ground and continue to work hard. Let's go digital. That's the future. Let's put all our products on the internet.
Okay.
E-commerce in the future.
E, the rise of the E. And I'm just looking at our theme, post-pandemic recovery, socioeconomic prospects amidst the chaos. I wanted to also talk about chaos for a while. I'm going to start with the psychologist. What do you suggest? How do people deal with give some tips on how to deal with chaos?
I think one of the most important steps is not to start now.
You shouldn't start the chaos, right? You don't start the chaos.
Because when it starts, it will get out of hand.
All right.
And also, before you take a decision in any chaotic environment, you need to pause and think again. Usually, when things happen to people, the initial response is emotional, but the subsequent responses has to do with your cognitive evaluation of whatever is happening. So in any chaotic environment, you always have to pause. For example, in a family, when something happens and everybody is all over the place, your immediate response is likely to be emotional. But if you pause a bit and evaluate the things a bit in a way that will solve the problems or bring progress, you are likely to take the right decisions. So you always have to pause. Then secondly, you have to develop the ability to listen and listen. When you are able to listen to why there is chaos in the first place, listen to all the people involved, you're likely to make the right judgments about way forward. Usually we don't listen in any chaotic environment. We attempt to solve problems without listening to those who are affected by those problems. And I think that is one of the biggest problems in Africa. Governments have their own manifestos, and those manifestos may not address people's needs. But if you listen to the people and what their needs are, it becomes easy to be able to address the issues properly.
So listen and listen. First of all, don't start the chaos.
Yes.
And number two, when it happens, listen. And
Pause.
Listen.
Before you take a decision,
Okay.
think about it again before you take a decision. You need to be able to listen.
Okay.
Especially for example, even in couples, when there are conflict between couples, usually the things they fight about, if you were listening to each other, you realize that issues are really simple. But when people don't listen, I think that affects conflicts.
All right. Let's thank you for that. Let's now bring it into the business arena, and I want to go starting from Regina. So, in this whole COVID period, what was the most chaotic time for you? And how did you get out of it? If you're looking back from 2022, was there any real chaos when the whole thing hit?
I think the most chaotic period was when we went in lockdown, and then we had to quickly figure out how do we still stay connected and engaged with the women and girls that we work with, or with the young people that we work with. And so how do we quickly do that transition? And how do we mix those who are not as privileged to be able to engage online full time, right? So Zoom would have been an easy one, but not everybody can afford to go on Zoom for a long period of time. So we were looking at all the different tools, so do we do a little Zoom, a little bit WhatsApp, a little bit Telegram, a little bit Google Classrooms, and do we build our own sort of proprietary way of communicating? How do we continue to offer support? Because then we now became the way for our alumni, our network to engage and have conversations about things or struggles that they were having. And so for us, as soon as lockdown was lifted, we had to come back in person. And how do we make sure that we do that safely? So how do we reduce the numbers? Because now we had to look at space considerations, but then there was a huge demand. So before in our programs, we had maybe 200, 300 women apply. Post-COVID, our first training program, we had over 2,000. So how do we now manage that increase in demand by keeping safety, keeping precautions, and making sure that everybody had been tested, figuring all that out. So that was pretty chaotic, making sure that we did things well and taking into consideration how to keep an eye on keeping the business going, but also health considerations.
Awesome, thank you for that, for sharing that. Brigitte, what was the most chaotic in that period, and how did you deal with it?
I wonder. That's the truth, because I think for me as well, probably the most chaotic was during the lockdown. But probably, I would like to go with what the doctor said. What we did in these parts was we took the fear and the panic from what was happening in other countries, and we went by that. So I keep saying that there really should be some research into how come we in Africa were spared the scourge of COVID, because we were. If you look at the scale at which people died or got infected and were sick and died in the West, we didn't have that effect. And I think for me, in that period of panic, it was literally just taking it a day at a time and dealing with that day, what needed to be done, getting it over and done with, and seeing what the next day was. And I remember I used to do a lot of posts on Facebook to say things like, oh, when people say who knows tomorrow, this is it. Because really, we didn't know what tomorrow would bring. And it taught us, and for the doctor, I agree with a lot of the things you said. The period of chaos probably taught us to recalibrate and not be so futuristic, but rather take it. I used to say we live in 2 week spurts. If you go out and you have your mask, even if you have your mask on, you go out and you don't get infected, or you don't know whether you get infected, you live for 2 weeks. And if you don't have any symptoms, and I guess you survive 2 weeks, then you can go out again. So it was a day at a time, really, for the chaos, if there was any chaos for me. The lockdown just meant that for a period, that period of 3 weeks, we could not have products come in from and of course we were very dependent on a lot of courier service, which that is another business prospect that we need to get right in this part.
How do you deal with it?
Well, interesting. We were forced to develop product and technology solutions that were going to take forever to do. So in the midst of all the happenings, we rather got ambitious and make this happen. But what really was the biggest highlight for me was when one of my closest business associates that were in a meeting together, and then 3 days down the line he passed.
Oh, that was a shock.
Through COVID.
Wow.
So that was really big, and because he had the bosom of most of the things that we were doing that have meant that it distracted everything we were doing as well. So dealing with the fact that the close friend is passed, and also dealing that the business is going to suffer was really big for me. But by the grace of God, we move on.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Isaac, how do you deal with any chaos in your life? I mean, you deal with patients' chaos, but you, the doctor, did you experience anything like that? How do you deal with? Just curious. How do you do things like that?
My mind went on to something. I think that personally, how I've been able to deal with issues in the past helped me in this season. I'm a very, very confident person. I'm very, very positive. So you sacked me from this job, I will find another one.
That's it.
You walk away from my life, I'll find another person. So a lot of things really don't get to me. So this season what helped me was my past experiences, the resilience I've built over the years. So though it was a bit difficult, but it wasn't as much as others may have experienced. So I think that physical health, we grow physically. The same way mentally we grow. Everything that happens to us through childhood affects us. So people should prepare for events so that when those events happen, they will not be unnecessarily affected.
How do you prepare for a pandemic?
How do you prepare for it? No, it's like developing resilience, ability to cope and adjust with situations. So that regardless of what happens, you are able to overcome. It's just like someone who's grown on the streets all his life. You know, when there's starvation, they don't even know how to start. When there are problems, they've seen, and that is even for when you look at soldiers and their training, they train them in a way to be able to, withstand difficulties on the battlefield. And that is how life is. We're not sure. Maybe there are worse pandemics, we don't know. But it is our ability to handle situations at this time that is going to give us, the capacity to handle things in the future. And so paying attention to your mental well-being, doing things that maximizes your mental well-being, develop that capacity to withstand situations, is what is going to be your security for what is going to happen ahead. Yes, and I think that is what we should focus on. Unfortunately, we focus more on physical well-being. We are prepared for all kinds of things. Physically, we eat, we do all kinds of things. But when it comes to mental health, we really don't do things on a daily basis. We are not intentional about, maximizing our mental well-being as much as we are intentional about physical well-being. And I think that gap is what we need to fill to be able to, handle situations when they come up in the future.
That's why you're here. You're helping us. That's absolutely. We are grateful for your presence here. This is one round the table. Those sounded like nice remarks to round off your contribution before we go for the questions. So I'll just go down the table with Stephanie next. A couple of just concluding remarks before we get the inputs from those who are watching us and listening to us here in the room on our theme. You can brief off our theme. Yes.
Sure, maybe I can.
Yes.
Sorry. Maybe just to add to what everybody's shared here, just on a personal note, I think what was challenging was the uncertainty for me. And I was separated from, my sister was in one location and my parents were in another. I think it was the same for everybody. And when would I see them again?
Yeah.
And so, but then, you sit here today in a panel, something you didn't think was possible 2 years
Exactly.
ago, to sort of remind you of the resilience and how far we've come, and really makes us all think to the future and how we can, think propelling, economic growth, inclusive economic growth here in Ghana. I would just again, reiterate, the importance that we place on partnerships with the Alumni Association, with other institutions here in Ghana to do just that, and that we're looking, enthusiastic and looking forward to continuing that work and, continuing to make delightful connections that make all that work possible.
Many thanks. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Chanel,
Yes. So
please put it on.
before I
Flip it up. There you go.
Yes, so I would like you to ask Isaac to tell us some of the mental health. He talked about physical well-being and mental well-being.
Yes, yes.
But he didn't say what exactly we should be doing as far as the mental health well-being is concerned. So you have to mention some of them for us.
Okay, you give him an assignment. He will respond. Don't worry, your assignment will tell it soon.
I only want to mention that the COVID-19 had meant that we should be more prepared. One of the things I'd like to see is to see how we can change our educational system to begin to introduce concepts like resilience, hard work, distractiveness, innovation, creativity, be prepared for pandemic, etc. in our schools. I mean, these should be things that the professor will come to lectures and talk about, so that we are training our students to be ready for the world out there. It's really one of the things I'd like to see.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Brigitte.
I would take it first of all from what Sonam said when he spoke about education. We haven't spoken a lot about that. But our education was disrupted. That was one thing that the chaos disrupted, and we are still trying to recover from. I don't think any of us has mentioned it. Children were home for months, almost a year, and we ought to have taken advantage of that, Regina, to put in technology for remote learning, whether they were going to come back in person or not. I think that education grew in leaps and bounds through this pandemic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I speak for Ghana, we didn't take advantage of that to put in the infrastructure for the level to which education has gone. And we are still talking textbooks, we are still talking badly printed textbooks.
Yeah.
the politician in me is coming out now.
No, it's a fact.
And we are talking about children missing out greatly on education in that period, particularly those in remote or rural areas.
Okay.
So that is one thing we must look at and address, whether we are government, GES, old girls and boys of schools and associations. I know one school where an old boy has put in such a system, and yet the school will not use it. Yes, I won't mention the school, you'll be surprised. But this is it. We need to build up our education to that level.
Thank you.
What was your question?
No, this is it. No, this is the question. This is it. We're just getting comments, and this is great. I love this.
Yes.
Yes.
So
You've answered the question.
that is one place we've not looked at. And you as USGA, if we can help in any way to implement some of these, to put in technology, educational technology in some schools, maybe we should look at it, come together and do something for the name of the association. I'm looking at Hilda. So that is it. But what else? I think I mentioned it already.
Yes.
Women's businesses is the way to go.
Thank you, Brigitte. And just before I bring in Regina, just for her comments, talking about the education thing. So there was research that showed that the watching of television skyrocketed during the pandemic. And the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, who I work for, actually converted one of their channels to a learning channel. And so they put the entire curriculum. We have people record videos, and it's live. So every day, and still till today, you still have people able to learn, follow the curriculum, GTV learning. So it's GDC learning, something like that. So there's a response there. Of course, there should be more. I was expecting even for the cost of devices to come rapidly down, so people could get that devices and get on board. I'm sure, Regina, I don't want to take the skills, but your comments.
There's something else I'd like to ask that. Sorry, Regina, I'm taking your time. But there was a British funded learning organization. I worked with them, VACI, and they changed their name to something else. Worked with Plan Ghana, and they moved the program onto the Ghana Education Service, where they have satellite-controlled televisions in rural areas. And then they teach from a studio in Accra to beam to all these areas. It's been handed over to GES. That's all I'll say.
Regina, what do you have to say? Concluding remarks before questions.
My mantra for the year, which I hope to share with everybody, is just add value. I think it's that simple. Like, in order to be able to survive, to thrive, to be able to continue in the world that we are going, ask yourself, am I adding value to myself? How can I continue to add value to myself? How can I add value in my workplace? How can I add value in my business? How can I add value in the family? If you continue to value add, then you are always prepared. So chaos, pandemic, whatever happens, you stay prepared and you don't have to get prepared.
Thank you. Well, I think you've all added value to our conversation, and it sets us up really nicely for the questions that will be coming in. I have seen one already on the live chat, and it's coming from Dorcas Lante. Just please, what's the business sector in Ghana doing about the government increment in commodities, also about price regulation? So this is a money issue, cost of living going up, and Dorcas wants to know what the response of the business community is. Well, Chona, you represent the business community here today in your capacity as AGI big boss.
Yeah, that's a great observation.
Yes.
We are all observing it. You go to the shop these days, and then the price is going up over 100% just from last week. It's crazy.
Yep.
I think that a lot of our shop owners are taking advantage of the situation. But what they don't know is that all of us will be affected. So it is important that people are careful the rate at which they are increasing prices, because now it's getting too artificial than market driven. Overall, things are getting a little bit stabilized. I mean, these few days, I've seen some stability as compared to what happened last month, where the exchange rate was extremely vulnerable. The reality is that because our economy is highly susceptible to what happens everywhere else, and so it's difficult. We're importing almost everything, so the prices are being changed almost on daily basis. If the freight cost goes up, they change the price. If prices of fuel goes up, they change the price. If you look at the whole inflationary situation, inflations are going up all time very high. But we're saying that as local economy, it's important for us to protect the sanctity of our environment. Otherwise, all of us will get our money and will not be able to survive because of the rate at which things are going. But overall, there's no direct governmental mechanism to control prices. In fact, in a market economy, you are not expected to do that. You are expected to allow the forces of demand and supply to regulate the prices. But what we're just urging is that some of these price increments are so artificial, and it is high time that all of us are circumspect the way we increase prices. So really that's what I'll say, but the politician friends will say more.
And it's not politics at all in this case, it's reality. I think more and more we must consume local. More and more we must insist on finding local products on our shop shelves, because the more imports we demand, the higher the prices will go up, because our foreign exchange is not stable, and these people, the shop owners don't, or the importers don't have a choice but to pass on the prices to us. Of course, there was that benchmark index back and forth, but the dollar or our foreign exchange is still expensive. So as much as possible, let us insist on consuming local, and it only goes to empower our local businesses, particularly the women.
Yes, why not? Always plugging. Thank you so much, Brigitte and Shona. Couple more questions.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, more. Oh, yeah. So this is from Yao Domko in Kumasi. My father grows cassava in the Dumbai area. He's been farming for years, but is still poor. Is there any hope for him? That's Yao Domko. And then there's Mensa from Vakpo. I live in Vakpo in the Water region. I have just started a poultry farm. How do I grow to become an industry giant? So entrepreneurial questions here. So, who wants to take it? Feel free.
Okay. So yes, those concerns are very genuine, that a bulk majority of our folks that are farmers are poor or are engaged in subsistence farming, and so it's from hand to mouth. I've realized that the folks who make the money are the middle guys who go to these farms, buy the products, and come and sell and make a killing, while our folks continue to wallow in poverty. The solution, we have got many solutions. Number one is the commodity exchange market that the government has introduced, where the farmers can directly trade their goods on the commodity stock exchange. I don't know to what extent is that process being done, but I think that will help a long way to solve the problem. Another way is to connect the farmers directly to the market, and also encourage the farmers to aggregate, as it were, form unions, so that they have a stronger voice and can enjoy economies of scale. Because it appears that all these farmers all of them in their own small corner, farming in a small way. But if they come together, they'll have a bigger voice. Probably what is lacking the leadership, that person, that entity, to bring them together. I've seen some of the cocoa farmers do it, and it'll be very effective for them. Another thing is that we need to train our farmers to learn how to spend money. Most of them, they don't have the skill of managing money. So when the money comes, some of them will go and engage in activities that are expenditure in nature. Buy cars and things like that, marry new women and so on. And yes, the men, I know. But the managing money, no matter how little it is a whole skill that we need to have. Can we get some of our investment bankers or investment banks to go to the rural areas and do sensitization program, helping these folks to create investment accounts so that they can channel and save some of this money and show them what to do with their money better. I was going to talk briefly about the previous question about
The prices.
not only the prices but also domesticating. Something happened recently in Nigeria where the president came out with a fiat and said we're not going to import rice any longer, and that all rice must be produced locally. In the initial stage, it was a big deal for the economy because they relied heavily on importation of finished rice. But over time, they have proven that it was worth waiting. They've proven that they could, if push comes to shove, they will have the capacity to produce. So if you go to Nigeria now, almost all the rice they consume are produced in Nigeria. What the government has done is to incentivize the Nigerian rice farmers. So much so that I've got friends that moved from Zimbabwe, relocated to Nigeria to engage in rice farming. Because the incentives are there. You just decide to be a rice farmer. They'll give you land, they'll give you all the inputs, and then you only have to pay back. I think that it's a high time that we look at some of these policies as well. I know that Ghanaians have a very interesting taste. We're so picky and choosy, we don't eat any rice at all. Our rice, we want it very special. But we have to begin to start from somewhere and consume what we produce, so that the monies can stay in. Otherwise, we have to continue to export our money to buy import these products. Thank you.
Thank you.
Since it relates to what I do,
Yeah.
I didn't hear what he said his father does.
Let me reiterate. So I'll read the message here. So since my father grows cassava
Yes.
in the Dubai area, he's been farming for years, still poor. Is that good for him?
Well, yes. It's a good point. I think one of the things Regina said in her closing was about value addition. The cassava will not sell until you've added value to it. I know people who grow palm in the Afadatu South District. We've had to add, we could eat palm oil, palm soup all our lives if we want. Or the women in Ve can produce jomi, the highest grade of jomi. If we don't add value to it, they'll continue to sell in rubber bags or use plastic bottles in a Friday market in Kolemu, in my hometown. But we must see to add value to that cassava that his uncle, his father is farming. I've been to Dubai, thankfully, through my campaigns. I have seen the cassava you have in Dubai all the way down to Kwanta, where women sit in great heaps of cassava. And it is, of course, some is converted into gari and some of it is converted into cassava dough. But who has actually thought of packaging that cassava dough into nicely labeled bags and calling it Dubai cassava? Because we know that good cassava comes from Dubai. It's up to you and I. We are the ones in the city who also consume cassava dough in large quantities, but we've left it packaged in big old sacks, dirty sacks, and some is brought here and the rest is left to perish. Why can we not actually have gari that is branded? So it says Dambai gari because we know that cassava comes from there. So that is the value addition that we need. We have quinine in Mo West. We have huge amounts of cola in Mo West. We have spices, copious amounts of spices in Mo West. I go to Zanzibar to tour spice markets, and nobody has made us know that you can go and tour spice farms in Mo West, for example. So it is indeed that value addition that we require. And maybe those of us in USGA and or have found ourselves in places of leadership, as Tonam said, should lead that cause. If you're in Accra and you know of your father's farm in Vako or in Dambai, think about that value addition, not just cassava for fufu. And let's take it from there.
All right, thank you so much, Brigitte. The fufu is making me think about food. And so I think we're going to wrap this up now. Thank you so much, all of you, for contributing to this very stimulating conversation. Don't know about you, but I got a couple of really great ideas and insights from our panelists. Let's appreciate them with a big round of applause. Regina Onu, Brigitte Igbonuku, Tona Makello, Stephanie Hutchison, and Dr. Isaac Newman. Arthur, thank you. You can all be great. Please clap for yourselves as well. Thank you. And before I hand over to the president of the USGA, I just want to make one comment that I'm really happy that the Ghanaian finger snap has come back. Because when we were in the middle of the pandemic, you couldn't shake hands. And then, if you don't know what the snap is, it's when you shake somebody's hand and then it's unique to Ghana. And it's now back. So I'm really happy. This is what I missed, and it's now back now. So thank you so much. All right. Okay, so on this note, I want to bring on to the stage our president, who will do us the honors of the closing remarks. Since there's no stand, if this is a microphone, we'll hold it. Or I hold it for you.
Thank you very much, Kafi Day, and thank you to the panel for a very engaging discussion. I was just sitting back there and enjoying every word that you said. So I took a few notes, thanks to Dennis. So we've spoken a lot about the socioeconomic recovery. We've been able to speak about focusing on solutions and not problems. We've spoken about women-led, women-focused startups as opportunities to grow. We've also spoken about e-commerce and e-business and focusing on those, as well as soft skills. Regina talked about failure mentality, that like failure is not really like failure. Failure is a part of growth, and if you have failed before, you'll definitely understand what she said. And it's important that we all improve our digital skills. Now we are here, we need to keep pushing and know that we will thrive. I'd like to say a big thank you to the panel members, our moderator who showed up for us at a late time, but he did. Thank you very much. And also to our partners, the U.S. Embassy, Ghana. We are very grateful for your constant support. We would also like to say thank you from all our alumni to everyone who is watching us online or who is seated here. Thank you and have a wonderful week.
Well, thank you very much, everybody.